A spontaneous hush has fallen over the crowd, so I think that's my cue to start. It's my pleasure to welcome Susan Bernofsky to Washington University, or to welcome her back, since she received her MFA from WashU in 1990. When I was asked to give this introduction, I realized that my own acquaintance with Susan goes back well over 10 years, I think 12 or 14 by now. We first met when I was working at New Directions Publishing in New York, fresh out of college. At that time, Susan had already translated a couple of books by authors including the Swiss writer Gerhild Williams, and she had just translated her first book for New Directions by the Japanese-German writer Yoko Tawada. Since then, she has added many more to her list, including a couple obscure writers like Franz Kafka and Hermann Hesse. And Susan may not remember this, but in 2006, New Directions actually sent me to Chicago to be there when she received the Helen Kurt-Wolff Prize, so yet another one of our encounters. Our paths have crossed many times since then. When I was studying at Berkeley, Susan came to do a workshop on translating Tawada, and I invited her, urged her to engage in an email exchange with Bernard Banu, who is Tawada's French translator, which we then published in our online journal in the German department there, known as Transit. A few years later, Susan gave a workshop for the German Book Office in New York, which I had the chance to attend as the recipient of the German Book Office's first translation prize, which Susan had also been one of the judges for. So the fact that I'm now standing here welcoming her to WashU just sort of brings everything full circle. And it keeps us on schedule every year or two. We have another reason to see each other. So I say all this not because I think that my acquaintance with Susan is an anomaly, but because I suspect that there are many people who could share similar stories. Susan is so active as a translator, as a promoter of translation in all kinds of forums, including her blog Translationista, as the director of the literary translation program at Columbia, that if you travel in translation circles, especially German translation, but not exclusively German translation, you're bound to encounter Susan at some point along the way. And I know that she's inspired other translators early in their careers, as she's inspired me, with her passion and commitment to translation, and with her skill and insight as a translator. To give just one example, which I think exemplifies Susan's attentiveness to the fine textures and nuances of language, when she translated Kafka's Metamorphosis, which by the way is the translation that I always use in my classes, she arrived at a solution for the novel's famously frustrating first sentence. In Bernofsky's translation, it reads, "When Gregor Samsa woke one morning from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed right there into his bed, into some sort of monstrous insect." I'm sorry, in his bed. Don't want to get her translation wrong. Some sort of monstrous insect, though. That's the important part. The German "zu einem ungeheuren Ungeziefer" has given translators fits for years, with others transforming poor Gregor into a monstrous vermin, a gigantic insect, a verminous insect, or even a monstrous cockroach, which in purely entomological terms he is not. But Susan's "some sort of monstrous insect" pinpoints the paradoxically specific vagueness of Kafka's Ungeziefer. Part of what makes Gregor so monstrous is precisely that we don't know exactly what he is, and the ungeheuren Ungeziefer, the some sort of monstrous insect, captures that perfectly. Translation is the center of Susan Bernofsky's many accomplishments, but it doesn't exhaust them by any means. She's also a scholar of German literature, currently working on a biography of Gerhild Williams, and I'd like to add that her reading of Kleist's Amphitryon in her monograph Foreign Words is a brilliantly insightful piece that interprets Amphitryon's distress at his replacement by a divine doppelganger as a sort of allegory for translation, in which the translation or adaptation poses an implicit threat to the original. In addition, as the director of the literary translation program at Columbia, Susan is active as a teacher and a mentor for the next generation of translators. So it's fitting that Susan Bernofsky is here today, not only as the William H. Matheson Lecturer, the latest in a series of lecturers that's included translation theorists such as Emily Apter and Lawrence Venuti. She's also, as you all know, the keynote speaker for the William H. Gass Symposium on International Writing. As we've already heard today, Gass has lived a life committed to teaching, writing, and thinking about literature internationally, being not only a widely acclaimed writer and critic, but also a translator and a trance reader of Rilke's Duino elegies. As you'll hear in Susan's talk, Gass also had a profound influence on his students, including Susan herself. By bringing Susan Bernofsky back to WashU for the William Gass Symposium, then, we honor the ways in which both Gass and Bernofsky have enriched the literary lives of students, readers, and other translators, and encouraged us to think of literature in international terms. Please join me in welcoming Susan Bernofsky.